Hello, Tile friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Tile Money Podcast. My name is Luke Miller, your host, and I am a contractor by trade. And today we are going to be talking with Gianna Vallefuoco about mindfulness in the workplace. And I want to thank my sponsors, the NTCA and Ladecrete International, for sponsoring this episode. And I first let me just turn this music down. I was first made aware of mindfulness, this article that Gianna wrote, mindfulness in the construction industry, in an article here. And I posted the link in the comments on Thrive Global, I guess it was. And it's a great article. And I started digging into this. Who is this? And what is this mindfulness? I've actually personally kind of been on this path of mindfulness and being aware, and so it really perked my interest. And I want to show you, let's see, I'll share my screen here. And so I started digging around and saw this beautiful website. It turns out that Gianna is a part owner in this, tile contractor business, and Italian tile artisans is what they call themselves. And I love their website. It's beautiful. They really specialize in high-end, work, and, they have a beautiful website, CTI member, NTCA member, Better Business Bureau. And then I started digging around and I saw this True Fairy Tile Stories. And I thought, what is that? So I looked at that, and here it is, their story, a true fairy tile story. And I just love this, the honesty. This is what really I think the about page of your website should be like. Tell your story. And it's this poem, I want to say, about how Gianna met her husband and how her husband learned the trade, and how, together they've built this beautiful business. So I just think that's so awesome. And I just wanted to share that before we bring Gianna on here. And so without further ado, let me bring Gianna on, and she can correct me if I've mispronounced her name. Gianna, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. And your pronunciation was like A+ in Italian lessons. So
right on. Thank you. So listen, tell us about yourself. Give us the 10,000 foot overview of your company, your business, the tile business that you and your husband, own together and operate.
Okay, so I love that you went to the website, and thank you. I haven't looked at that in so long. And that really is, I think you kind of conveyed it well. So we're really a mom and pop shop, and we did want to convey that on our website. We built that website 21 years ago. And I mean, we've changed it a little since then, but we really did start out. My husband, he did building restoration. He's from Italy, and I met him in '97 while I was studying oil painting there. And, he was, I want to say self-taught. He trained with an uncle, and he's an artisan, and he had the courage to start his own business about a decade before I met him. And so when we moved to the United States, I was pregnant with our first child. We decided to start a tile business. So his background was in building restoration, but things are very different there. Everything's masonry. And the one thing that was consistent was tile. Mm-hmm. So we started our business, and I can honestly say, and I noticed, I didn't even realize NTCA was a sponsor. NTCA has been by far the greatest resource that we've had. If I could name one resource in the industry. In 2012, we became a 5-star designated member, and we're definitely one of the smaller businesses of 5-star members. There are a lot of big commercial companies, and we're just a small, more residential. I say high end. We do specialize in high end, but we do jobs of all sizes, all different levels. Mm-hmm. Every job is important to us. And so my background, my undergrad was in psychology, and I've always been fascinated by the brain. And mm-hmm. so as I did yoga for many years, and I learned about mindfulness, and there's a lot of neuroscience involved in that, which we'll probably get to in this podcast, but there is a lot of brain science in there. So a few years ago, about 6 years ago, I just started incorporating these mindfulness concepts into our business. And, it's been incredibly helpful and meaningful, and it's resonated with a lot of people. So it's become certainly a part of my aspect of the business. And NTCA has been amazing in letting me write about it for one of their publications, and they embraced it. Leslie Godden practices mindfulness. She's the editor for, I think, the big publications
Tile
for
letter.
NCC. Yeah, the Tile letter, and just an amazing, inspiring, industry person. So I've been so lucky to be able to share that with her.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
now you.
No, it's reaching people, and I think it's a great topic, one that doesn't always, come up in construction workers, everyday thinking and thought process when you're building a business. But it certainly is an important subject, and something that I think at some point we all, start to kind of think about, and as we mature, and curious to know how some people just seem to have everything together, and they're growing these beautiful businesses and have these beautiful families, and we start digging around and researching, and I think that's what leads a lot of us to this topic. So maybe tell us about your journey, why mindfulness, how mindfulness is such a powerful impact for business owners.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I think mindfulness kind of is something that if it occupies one aspect of your life, it's going to occupy other aspects of your life, because it affects all aspects of your life. So, I can kind of explain to you a little bit about what it is, if that would help, and then how it kind of ties into business.
Yeah, let's give it the basics, maybe the introduction.
Sure. So because it's kind of this word that sounds a little woo-woo to a lot of people. And so I always like to demystify it if I can. So think of it as fitness for the brain. That's one way to look at it, right? We do all these things to make our bodies healthy and fit. And it's something that allows our brain and our mind, rather, to really kind of be trained in a certain way. There are lots of different ways of describing it. Some people say it's being aware. So it's the opposite of being on that autopilot mode where you're not really paying attention. It's also been described as the process of separating ourselves from our thoughts. So a lot of times we kind of become our thoughts. We're so trapped in our thoughts, we forget that they're just thoughts. Whereas when we learn to practice mindfulness, we become the observer of our thoughts. So in my definition of really what mindfulness is, and then I can explain how I incorporate it with the business, it's kind of got 4 basic principles. So it's being in the present without judgment, with compassion, and with curiosity. And this, you've probably heard the term, be present, which doesn't always mean that much to people, but being present, if you really think about life, when we are not present, when we're not living in this actual moment right here where you and I are looking at each other and speaking to each other, our minds wander off to the past and the future. So it's like the should haves of the past and the shoulds of the future. And that's when we start to suffer. And there's a wonderful yoga teacher once said to me, talking about the shoulds and the should haves, she said, don't should all over yourself. And we really do. We're shoulding all over ourselves. And so and it's then that we start to feel like we failed, or we feel shame and regret or fear about the future. So that presence, really learning to, like, when you're listening to someone or talking to someone, look them in the eyes. And when you're eating something, enjoy it, taste it. When you're with your children, be there with them. And then this idea of curiosity, compassion, and trying not to judge. So that's what it is. And then you had said, in our business. So I don't know if you've heard the term VUCA, a VUCA world. So VUCA, this is a term that I think it originated talking about something in terms of a military situation, but it's been used a lot of in the business world in the present. And VUCA is an acronym for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I think that's just so defining of what our business world is like right now. And of course, our personal world too. So mindfulness helps us navigate the volatility, the uncertainty, the ambiguity. There's a lot of ambiguity. It's like, yes, be kind, but put yourself first. We're getting a lot of these ambiguous signals. And so mindfulness has been brought in, and like big companies like Google, Target, General Mills, Aetna, Intel, major sports teams, all of them are investing in mindfulness because it has been so productive. I mean, we're talking, if you're just looking at numbers, they're getting a return on their investment. They're seeing, improvements, and I could go on and on about that, but like employee performance, interpersonal relationships, employee loyalty, all kinds of things like that. Performance.
They're investing in mindfulness for their companies because they're tracking it, just like all business owners should do.
Exactly.
Whenever you invest time or money in your business, you got to track that, and then make sure you see a return on investment. And what you're saying to us is they're seeing a real return on investment. So we should, as business owners, we should be interested in this.
You should be. You just said it exactly. Like, you heard everything I said. You listened very mindfully, but that's exactly it. And you can also think of it as this: you're really investing in people. And I mean, for a small business like us, it's, we don't have to build a mindfulness space and get corporate classes and do trainings. We can just kind of start to change the culture. There are all kinds of small steps you can take.
Yeah, I like it. So the small steps you can take, what would the first step be?
Okay. So I'll tell you I'll tell you some little things that we've done. So the first thing I did, and it sounds a little, maybe simple and ineffective, but it really made a difference, is we had a gratitude jar. And I put this gratitude jar in our office, and this started years ago with one of my office managers. And we would write a note and just say something for which we felt grateful. And we really started that as a practice more when things went wrong, right? So we'd say, oh my God, I just hung up the phone with this, really unhappy client. And I felt like I just couldn't give him or her, I couldn't resolve the situation, in their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'd choose or someone wouldn't pay us, or we'd, some dispute, some conflict. And we'd say, okay, well, let's find something for which we do feel grateful. And it might be so-and-so was very kind, or so-and-so was so forthcoming, or this went really well, or it could be something from a personal life. It doesn't have to be business related. And then we'd have the UPS driver come in and he'd drop a note in there. And, it was, if we put it in a certain place in the office, it was more visible. And the reason this is effective, and this sounds kind of strange, but, the brain, this is all the neuroscience stuff, the brain, our emotions trigger our brain to signal the different chemicals be made in the body. And so stress hormones are cortisol and adrenaline. And those are like the survival response stress hormones. But when we're feeling compassion and gratitude and these, what we call high vibrational emotions, we make very different chemicals. We make serotonin and that feel-good hormone. And so by feeling gratitude, you're actually changing the chemistry of your brain. And I once had a very interesting practitioner of biofield science. She worked with energy and Reiki, if you've heard of that, and just moving energy around. And she talked about gratitude as a superpower. Mm-hmm. So, feeling gratitude, it's just kind of, if you want to simplify it, it's forcing you to focus on the positive. Sounds really simple, but that's rewiring your brain, and that's changing the chemicals that are being made in the body. So that was a practice we brought in. And then I started doing intention setting. I've been predominantly involved in the design with clients, in design and creating spaces and space planning. So what I started doing was, I'd get to know my clients. Again, we're a mom and pop shop. We're very hands-on, human connection, personal experiences. And I talked about, let's set an intention for this space. And an intention is just kind of an emotion that you want to amplify or cultivate in a space. So we wouldn't just plan the kitchen. We'd say, well, is this a space for creativity, or is this a space for loving kindness? And then based on that, it would become so easy to make selections or if it was for a room that was meant to be peaceful, and you would eliminate a whole bunch of selections that weren't peaceful. They weren't, aligned with this intention. And it sounds a little woo-woo at first, but, there's a lot of methodology to it. So it really seemed to work.
No, I believe it. And you're obviously doing it and finding clients that are paying you to do that type of,
Yeah.
design and intention. I also, have been, really, focusing on a lot of the stuff of what you're talking about. And so it's really, I'm agreeing and it's ringing true. And, the gratefulness thing, I believe in 100%. I mean, recently our friend, Shannon Huffstickler has been, posting every day, almost like 5 things she's grateful for. And it reminded me, I forgot, I've fallen out of that habit because
Right.
I'll write it in my notebook. I'm grateful for, even just a few things makes a difference. But if you do it every day, it kind of sets your day right, sets it out on a positive vibe. And it really has an impact for anybody listening who thinks this, doesn't work. Just try it. Just start your day out with a grateful, what are you grateful for? And actually put the pen to paper. Tell us what that does when you put the pen to paper. And then I find it interesting. You had a jar people were putting it in. Was there a reason for that? Or was it just to encourage them to do
I
that?
think it was just the visibility of the jar. So
Mhm.
I do my own gratitude practice. I do like exactly what you said. And I think it's so amazing that you're doing this already. So I do it in bed in my head, but then I do it once. I do journaling after I do my meditation, and I'll always write something for which I'm grateful.
Mhm.
But yes, it was really just visibility. So we wrote gratitude jar on it.
Mhm.
And I recently, I have a neighbor who a new neighbor, and I just wanted to go over and bring a gift, and she has young kids, and I brought them gratitude jars. And I thought, this might seem a little weird, like I'm giving them this empty jars, right? But I think it's such a meaningful thing. And right now I feel like we've been ripped off in so many ways, right? Like no graduations and proms and weddings and vacations, and forget,
Yeah.
income and all that other stuff that's getting canceled. But
Right. Yeah.
by rather focusing on what we're grateful for, we're improving our well-being. And
Yeah.
there is so much science behind that.
Yeah. I agree. I agree 100%. And what is it? July 15th here, 2020. We've just, gone through almost 3, 4, 5 months of a lot of negative things, a lot of just bombarded every day, bomb, bomb, bomb. I mean, the news has always been negative, but it just recently just really driving home a lot of negative things. Facebook has just become a negative place on many levels. And, I've been caught up in it, to be honest. And it's not good for the person to have so much negative thoughts. So that's why you have to combat this stuff. And, you talked about health, stress, all this stuff where, everybody is stressed out, it seems. And you can really tell by people's comments and the way they're interacting with each other. I mean, they just it's a thin, everybody's got to walk on eggshells. Otherwise, and even I, at times have just, lose it online or in person or whatever. So how does mindfulness and stress, by the way, I don't think anybody would argue stress is like super unhealthy. It's, if there should be a war on something, it should be a war on stress, and, toxins and this type of stuff. But how is mindfulness combating stress and improving health in people's lives?
Such a beautiful question. And everything you just said resonated with me. I know we are so reactive, right? We're just in this, we're living in survival mode. And I'll actually explain a little bit about the science behind that. But I also wanted to say, we are ready to jump on everyone, right? Like someone says something that we don't agree with, and we're very divisive as a country right now. And I think this is such an important podcast you're doing, because this is how we can deal with it. And, I had mentioned initially that there's, these components of mindfulness. One of them is compassion. I mean, there are many others, but these are the ones I find important. And one of them is compassion, and that's also self-compassion. So when you do react, forgive yourself, right? We're all human. So that's an important thing to think about. And then remember that non-judgment. So, try not to judge others and yourself. And that's really, these are all components. So I want to talk a little bit about the innate stress response we have, because stress reduction is, it's very easy to sell people on. Saying mindfulness is not an easy sell. Like people will roll their eyes. I was on the wellness committee at my kids' high school, and I would use the word mindfulness and it didn't go over that well. And then I'd say stress reduction and they'd go, oh, yes, everyone's ears perked up. So here's a little quick evolutionary biology lesson, and I'll try not to make it boring, but humans are built for survival, but we are not built for chronic stress. So millions of years ago, our brains were designed just to monitor threats for our survival. So if a saber-toothed tiger was in the woods and we'd see it, it would send an alert to our brain. And the amygdala is that region in the brain. It's made up of two almond-shaped formations that are kind of like our panic button. And when that alarm goes off, we get set into that fight or flight response. We've all heard of that. And that is essentially the stress response, also known as survival mode. So this would send oxygen to the blood, or oxygen and blood to the extremities so that we could fight or we could run. And our brain would signal production of those two stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, and we'd increase blood pressure, blood sugar. We'd suppress the immune system so that all of our resources could go toward survival. And that was brilliant, but it was not meant for long term.
Right.
You were meant for 20 minutes to fight off or run from whatever, was a threat or a perceived threat. So now we're living in this society where, we're really not fighting for our survival most of the time. We're rather fighting to fight. So we're living in this stress mode, and all our resources are being used toward as if our body needs to survive, and they're not being used for what they should be, which is, our immune system and regenerating cells. And so our bodies react. And this is a really important thing I'm about to say. Our conscious mind is a little slow. Our body reacts and recognizes this stress response before our conscious mind is aware. So we're on a job site and something pisses us off, or someone takes our wet saw, or the dog walks on our freshly set tile. I'm throwing in random things.
Sure.
And me or the installer or whomever it is feels their heart start to beat fast, or, their throat start to close. And before they're even aware of observing the situation, this survival mode kicks in. And the reason, we've all heard that expression, shake it off, right? Just shake it off. That came from, a literal explanation of the stress response. So we're making cortisol and adrenaline. If you ever see an animal hiding in a bush from, a dangerous situation, they are literally, the adrenaline has been pumped into their body, and adrenaline cannot be reabsorbed after it's been, emitted. So the body has to literally shake it off. So here we are in stress mode, and our bodies are saying, hey, I've given you all this adrenaline and cortisol so that you can run and punch whomever. And instead, and the only way to get rid of it is to shake it off. And so we feel this stress response. So before our conscious mind notices, can say, oh, wait, someone did something upsetting. I am now in survival mode and my sympathetic nervous system is going crazy. Before we can recognize that, our body says, oh my God, I'm jittery, I'm upset. I mean, I've been in a situation where I tried to respond to an email very unmindfully. Someone said something upsetting that wasn't true, or I believed it was not true, and I perceived it as a threat. I could not type because my hands were shaking so hard. Yeah. And so I literally looked up and said, oh my God, adrenaline, cortisol. Yeah. And so mindfulness allows us to kind of take a step back and say, here I can self-regulate. I have these methods that I can use to counteract this stress response. And so we have the stress response that is elicited by the sympathetic nervous system. And then we have the relaxation response, which is kind of like the brake pedal or the parasympathetic nervous system. And so the ways that we can kind of turn on the brake when we feel the accelerator, the stress response, they're just 4 super simple techniques I like to use. Taking 3 deep breaths sounds silly, but you're actually giving yourself time, right? It takes time to breathe. And you're initiating that relaxation response. Another one, and this is a good thing to know, extending our exhales. So say you breathe in for a count of 4 and you breathe out for a count of 6, you've now extended your exhales. And that allows the heart rate and the blood pressure to go down. So now we've actually self-regulated and consciously initiated this relaxation response. So just knowing that you have these tools is helpful.
Yeah.
And then, stilling your mind. I mean, I know meditation sounds like something crazy and woo-woo for a lot of people, but when you start to do it, or even if you're doing it incorporating it into your regular life. A meditation can be walking through the woods. It can be doing something that is stilling your mind. Your brain reprograms itself to do that automatically after a while. And then, one other thing is this focusing on compassion. So we stop making the cortisol, and the brain instead, triggers production of serotonin and dopamine, those feel-good pleasure hormones, and so, or chemicals. And so there are a lot of ways that we can, self-regulate, I'm going to call it, actually take this autonomic nervous system of ours and regulate it through our actions. So,
Ron says it's hard for 28 days.
If you do it for 1 minute a day, it's easy after like 3 days. Okay. Ron's probably doing it for a longer time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that 28-day thing or 3 or 4 week thing is
right.
like any habit, right? Like any habit, you have to develop that habit before you get into it and start really practicing it. And, Ron's right. You have to get over that hump. Otherwise, you're going to get discouraged. You're going to say it's not working, yada, yada, yada. I mean, sometimes some of this stuff will work instantly. For me, the Grateful Journal, that worked almost instantly. I did it this morning. I'm in a great mood. I love the subject. I love all this. I believe in all this. So let's keep going here. What you gave us some good tips to kind of, control our anger, control ourselves in the heat of the moment, so to speak, bring ourselves down to reality, back to reality, and kind of, be aware of how we're reacting to the situation. Right. How about in the workplace? Like, how can we, how are you as a company? Because how many employees do you have?
Well, we have right now 5 crews, and they're like 1 to 3 people in each crew. And then I have my office manager, my husband, and me. So it varies a little bit because, believe me, we've been slow. We've been slow, and March was tough. And I had 2 installers that their wives wouldn't let them come to work. Not that we had much work. But yeah, so let me tell you, I'll be honest. So in the workplace, there are a lot of ways to incorporate it. I don't go on job sites as much, but believe me, when I do, I will throw in my mindfulness methods.
Yeah.
So, this, and I'll talk about this because you really need to create a culture of mindfulness. It's not just one person practicing it, although one person practicing it is amazing. It's already a huge step forward. But I guess I can tell you a little bit about, some mindfulness practices that we've brought to work, and I can also tell you benefits for business. I attended a training program through, it's called SILI, no pun intended. It's Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. And I don't know if any of you know this, but Google does a lot of classes for their employees. They just provide a lot of classes. They've always done that. They've been known for that. And they had a class called Search Inside Yourself about this inner search and this mindfulness. Yeah. And it was so popular. It was booked out 6 months in advance for a long time. And eventually it took on its own, kind of became its own entity, not exactly through Google, but it launched through Google's, starting it as a class. And they launched the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. And so I remember one of the first things I was taught there was this fabulous expression: mindfulness will make your life work better and your work life better. And It's true. And it really works. So I'll tell you a few things. First, I'll tell you like how to create this culture of mindfulness. So we talked about one of the things I think is super important. And I mean, in any industry, but I'll say in my experience in the tile industry, any problems we have that become installation problems are really communication problems. There was some break in communication at some point. And so it's not necessarily, I mean, even if it's a bad installation, and I want to tell you we're perfect and we never have bad installations, but unfortunately we're made of humans. Sure. So like we've, as I say, we're our best installer on his worst day. Yeah. And if something happens, there's some type of communication issue, or sometimes it's this inner communication with self. So I say, promote mindful listening techniques and make communication intentional and effective. So as you're speaking to me, as opposed to, I think a lot of us will listen to someone and decide what we're about to say while we're listening, right? So we kind of stop listening. But if you stop that and you just listen and let your response be based on what you hear, not what you already want to say, but truly, listen with the intention of letting that other person be heard. It's a super important tactic in mindfulness. So if you're on the phone, so I say, look at people in the eyes, right? Like I'm trying to look you in the eye through this video. And if we're on the phone, one other way to do it is, maybe just repeat a few words back to show that, you're being heard. My daughter took her driver exam yesterday, and there was a true communication problem. And the person can't come in the car with you anymore because of the pandemic. So, there was a hearing issue, and it didn't result well for my little girl. No. And, I talk about, and I said to her afterwards, and how crushing that is, right? To have to wait a couple more weeks to get your license. And I said, you will remember the lesson from this more than you will remember if you had just passed. Wow. And, communication's important. So,
what are they doing? Like a FaceTime
No, it's so crazy, Luke. So you go in there and I get in the car with her, and then we drive to the little course. And then I get out of the car and I wait under a tree with other awaiting parents. And the instructors stand about 20 feet from the car or 10 feet from the car and direct them. They're never in the car. Wow. Everyone's masked, so you can't read lips. Right. And there was a major communication problem. And I said, this is an example. I mean, and it's interesting though, right? So we're pivoting all the time during this pandemic, having to do things differently. And so mindfulness is so important because we're learning, we're evaluating, we're listening, and when we're present and we notice what goes wrong, we can learn from it. And I can kind of weave this into what happened yesterday with the driving too. I promote empathy. So promoting empathy at work is super important. Put yourself in other people's shoes. And, I said to my daughter, I'm like, sweetie, it wasn't your fault. She didn't communicate that well. And she's like, Mom, she was really upset too. I think she really wanted me to pass. And it was so beautiful to see my daughter find empathy for the person who failed her. I was like, okay, good. I love that. There's something. So really putting ourselves in each other's shoes, because I mean, you have no idea how many drawings I've done for installers, and they come to me and they're like, yeah, it's easy to do that with a pencil, right. Try to do it with a wet saw and and when, your wall's not plumb. And so put yourself in other people's shoes. And then one other practice we do, I have always said, allow for short, regular breaks. So my office manager now, my office manager before her, me, we take these walking breaks during the day. Mm-hmm. And, again, I say, like, to any business owners or managers, that time off work is still time on work, because they are resetting. They are resetting their mindset. It's productive. Taking a break. Yeah. It's productive. And this is in life. That's why we take vacations. Yeah. It's so important in all relationships. And again, there's this parallel between our personal life and our business life. What we practice in one, we should practice in the other, these interpersonal connections. So also, we talked about, focusing on curiosity, non-judgment, compassion, and also innovation. Like, allow people, if you're not sitting there criticizing them, they have the space to be a little creative, a little innovative, take a little risks. Yeah. And then also, to create this culture of mindfulness, we can use terminology and methods to create this culture. I remember, I know in prison systems where they're using mindfulness, and in Title I schools where they're using mindfulness, you're seeing these kids that were carrying guns and truly from hostile home situations with no support and no, kindness and no wonderful role models coming to school and saying, I need to take a 3-minute breath, or I need to take a moment to arrive. And also in prison, incarcerated, with incarcerated populations, where they're teaching them this new terminology. So instead of, just using expletives, which is how we usually, and believe me, I'm as guilty, I'm in the construction industry too. I've learned, we can find a new terminology. So you could say, like, I need a 1-minute reset, or I need my, 3 deep breaths, and create this culture, and, where it's okay it's not weird, it's not shameful, it's, it's okay to use these terms, and then create this new terminology that's understood. And it, in what I learned through the SILI program, the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, is to really create cultures. So I know I can't make all my installers and helpers and everyone on the job site, I mean, would like that to happen, and that is my goal one day.
Right.
But for now, just having one person, or seeing someone sitting meditating, you might laugh at first, and then you might think, that's kind of beautiful. And what have they got going on? Because they certainly seem to be less reactive.
Yeah.
So we can create these cultures, even in the construction industry. And I can say for the tile industry, I mean, I have received such wonderful, compassionate openness and feedback. And I really think, I don't know if all aspects of the construction industry are like this. I know the tile industry best, but, NTCA has been amazing, and other colleagues I know. I mean, we've cried together over these last few pandemic months, big men and girls and whomever. We've shared some very, human moments together. And I think having compassion be okay in the workplace is important.
Yeah. And really what you're talking about here is building a culture, building, a team that really, has a similar goal in mind, and can work together and, be empathetic. I mean, it just sounds great. It sounds like something that, you can really move forward with, and then continue to scale. And like you said, you're empower anybody who wants to build a business. You have to empower people. You have to let them do their thing and trust them. But you give them like little tools along the way to say, hey, here's how you're going to, be able to do this. Take a walk, step back from your work. If you're confused or, distraught, step back from your work and go get some fresh air, and take yourself away from the situation, and come back and approach it with maybe some new thoughts that you had, or, some new eyes on it. And we've all experienced this as tile setters. We get up and we look at the work. So it's super important. Like Ron's saying here, it's like tapping into a secret power. It's so true. It's right there all along. Each one of us can do it. And we need to do it. Let's talk a little bit. Have you tracked kind of the business benefits? I mean, how is it in real time, real world experience? How is it affecting your business? Or maybe you can even cite other examples. I mean, you cited some examples earlier.
Yeah. Wow. So I would like to answer that. And, we're a small company, so I don't have kind of physical data that I can show you, but I can tell you about some experiences. And first of all, I love what Ron said. It is such a superpower. And you also said something, and again, that word power came up. You said it's empowering. You can, what we're doing is to empower people. And I think that is so important what you said, because what we really want to do is make people feel like empowered and that they have a say in something. And so I'll tell you my own experiences. And again, I deal mostly with clients. I deal with my office manager. Bernardo, my husband, deals more with the installers, but there have been occasions where, when I'm on job sites, I'm super mindful of letting the installer be heard, because I can come in and I hear, often if I'm there, there's a complaint, right? Or I'm there to guide them And, I can say, do this, do that, but I don't have the beautiful skill and artistry that the installers, and I don't know their limitations. And so, one of the things I've noticed is by shutting my mouth, and this is truly a practice. We did this practice I've done with the groups, and it's so hard now because we're not in person, but where you are in a group and I'll have two people, and usually strangers. So if we're in a new group, talk to each other, and you take turns listening and hearing, and you look each other in the eyes. And of course, how awkward, right? Looking a stranger in the eyes for 2 minutes straight, and they're talking to you and they're revealing some type of conflict that they're having in their life. Mm. And the first thing people want to do is say, oh my God, I know, we want to show empathy. And that is such an innate thing. So we always want to search for that empathy. So I have found when I go onto the job site, the first thing I do is listen to my installers complain, because they need to complain. They need to be heard. And I will tell you, just by shutting my mouth, because sometimes they expect me to come there and say, either tell them what my client complained about. And I'm really giving you moments of conflict. 98% of our moments are wonderful and joyful and go well. But the 2%, we have this, negativity bias. We only remember the negative. And so when there is a conflict, the most important thing is to allow someone to be heard, and really be heard, not listen to, okay, I'm going to let you speak, and then I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. Rather, I'm going to let you speak, and then I'm going to evaluate the situation based on what you're telling me. And, so letting them be heard is sometimes 90% of the problem. Sometimes Bernardo, my husband, will say, you talk to the installer because he won't listen to me. And maybe because my husband and he are butting heads, and they both understand the same concept. Sometimes bringing a fresh perspective. I don't know if you've ever heard the term beginner's mind. So kind of approaching something with like almost the mindset of a child. So even though you've been installing, mud set with weep holes and waterproofing with that old system 1,000 times, I'm telling you, you should use the, Schluter-Curdy system. And you're going to say, no, this is how it's done. And we're joking, but I'm serious. But I've had to say that to people who did it a different way. And by the way, there are a million ways to do things. We know there's not one way to do things, but trying to get our installers and our clients, our clients and builders, to approach things with a beginner's mind. So I'll say, could you open yourself up to this? And, one of the most constructive sentences and questions I've ever been told, and you kind of brought this up before, you said we need to empower people, is to say to someone, what do you need right now? What would serve you right now? Sometimes it's to vent. That might be enough. Yeah. Sometimes it's to say, I need someone else to hear me, or I need you to give me this. You, as one of the owners, I need you to provide me with some instructions, or I need the client to not look over my shoulder. And so, and I say this sentence, what would best serve right now, or what do you need right now? That is a question that can be asked on every job site, in every office, in every marriage, with every child, teacher. That is just such a simple question. And sometimes we need to ask ourselves, I'm alone, I'm frustrated, I'm depressed, I'm not even sure why. Maybe it's because there's a pandemic. Maybe I'm just depressed. Right. What do I need right now? And that's that self-compassion. So this idea of compassion is self-compassion, compassion for others, and then really listening to them and saying, what do you need right now? Because a lot of times we can offer them something that may be so obvious, but we didn't think about it because we're looking at it with the same mindset. And if we bring in that beginner's mindset, that way of looking at something with fresh eyes and no judgment and compassion, and again, curiosity. I use that term, curiosity. Bring curiosity to the job site, not judgment. Hey, this shower pan's leaking. Why? Not why. Why is this shower pan leaking? Yeah. Why is this shower pan leaking? Let's investigate it. Yeah. That curiosity over judgment.
That's a good way to interact with people on, Facebook, right? Instagram as well. Like, oh, I noticed you're doing it this way. Why are you doing that? I mean, you might learn something. Or,
Absolutely.
you might help someone fix something that they're doing wrong.
Totally.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. One more question here before we wrap this up. Rewiring our brain. As contractors, I mean, we all kind of, most of us take a similar path in life. Some of us are like, almost like rejects to society. I'll raise my hand, just different type of people. Maybe we've had a harder life. Maybe we, just really have a hard time grasping certain concepts, or, the people I coach, tile contractors, business owners, a lot of them say, well, I don't want to charge that much. I can't charge that much in my area, or I don't want to rip people off. I mean, all these kind of like bad mindsets that we've somehow developed over the years or been taught, like lied to, and we believe them. How can we start to rewire our mind to move past things, and just in a general sense, or if you want to talk about something specific that I mentioned?
I love everything you just said. And also that thing about the construction industry, right? Where you said rejects, right? You said, we're like, oh, maybe we failed out of school. Maybe we were told we weren't good at writing. And, my husband is one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. And he is not highly educated, but he is brilliant. He is an artisan. He is the best problem solver I know. I mean, he's got a million flaws, don't get me wrong. But there is this, I think he did feel like in this culture, in Italy, being an artisan bears some respect. And here it's like, oh, you're a laborer, you're blue collar, so we've got to really just get rid of all the labels. That is one thing, get rid of the labels. Every single person is worthy of respect. Every single person is brilliant in some ways and struggles in other ways. And so, right. One thing I want to say about rewiring the brain, there are very specific things about rewiring the brain, but your brain is made a certain way, and you're like, here you are, this, whatever brought you on this path, you're an entrepreneur, you had the courage to start your own business. I certainly wouldn't have. My husband had his own business, and if I wanted to keep him in the United States, I had to make a business here, and I had to take some risks. I didn't have the courage. Without him, I wouldn't have.
Yeah.
So we want to rewire our brains for the things that aren't working, and kind of take advantage of those that are working. So there's a neuroscience expression, you actually can train an old brain new tricks. And there's a term called neuroplasticity. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it refers to the brain is essentially able to change its form and its function just from repeated activities. So repeated practice. And I think Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. And in yoga, in my yoga teacher training, we learned that we practice, we don't perfect. We practice. That's how life is. So practicing. So the way to rewire the brain is honestly through these meditation and mindfulness practices, but we have to understand really what thoughts are. So we actually have to rethink to rewire. So if you ask, what are our thoughts? To me, this always fascinated me. And I remember learning this in like my early, freshman year psychology class, that thoughts are neurons or brain cells that fire or send signals within the brain. And these nerve cells that fire together also wire together to form what are called neural networks or neural nets, which are really thought patterns. So once we keep thinking something, our brain starts to do it automatically. That's our subconscious mind. And we live most of our life through our subconscious mind. So understand that we as humans, for survival, have a negativity bias. We tend to concentrate on the negative, like there's something dangerous there. And our day, 5,000 good things happen and 2 bad things happen, and we concentrate on the bad things, and our subconscious mind fixates on them. And our subconscious mind says, you're going to fail. You should be, you have self-doubt, be shameful, shame and blame. We shame and blame. So what we want to do is, and this is probably a somewhat new concept for the construction industry. I'm taking a little of this from my yoga philosophy training. And so to rewire the brain, we have to think wisely and we have to think non-harmfully. So remember, thinking, as we think, we wire the brain. So rethinking is rewiring. So there is a concept in the Yoga Sutras, the ancient yoga teachings, called ahimsa, which means non-harm. And it deals with our deeds, our words, and our thoughts. So, our thoughts create the most harm. So what we want to do is reprogram or rewire our thoughts to not criticize ourselves. And so there is this concept that is sometimes taught in the business world. Its origins are through Buddhist teachings and Hindu teachings, but you may have heard of it. It's called practicing the 3 gates of speech. And I learned it, the first time I heard it was, I honestly want to say like in summer camp or something like that, before you speak. So before speaking, let your words stop at 3 gates, each of which asks a question. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And I know when you think of rewiring the brain, you're thinking of like creating new nerve endings and things like that. But this is really how you do it. What you want to do is start thinking consciously. And every time you catch yourself not doing it, bring yourself back to doing. And I use this as the 3 gates of speech because I use this for the 3 gates of thought. So, I started thinking, I look in the mirror and I'm seeing new wrinkles. And I'm just giving you an example. Okay, women focus on this and men might focus on something else. Or I'm looking at my kids and I'm judging them about something. Or I'm looking at this job site. I mean, I've seen clients where I walk in and I feel so grateful that we've done this beautiful job. And all they see are like the lippage in the one area, and they don't see all the difficulty that went into so many things. And I think, thank goodness that's not me. I don't see life that way, right? So we want to retrain our brains. And let me explain the benefits and like how this practice works. So the benefits of thinking this way and rewiring the brain cause notable changes in like how our brain behaves. So reduced rumination. Rumination is that thinking the same thought over and over again. And I'll just explain really briefly. So when we have an emotion, emotions create a natural arc. They start to build up and then they kind of reach a high point and then they go back down unless we perpetuate them with thoughts. That is how depression works. That is how, even falling in love works, right? We're like that. Oh, and we re-perpetuate it with, oh, he's so groovy or whatever. Yeah. And I mean, obviously with our children, we love them, but with all kinds of love and all kinds of negative feelings. So as I said before, your brain is wired a certain way. Use it the way it's wired well. Hold on to that and keep practicing that. You might say, I'm Luke, I'm courageous. I do, I pivot. I go from a tile contractor to a podcast, and I can just keep creating and being innovative and use that. And then the part of you that's not working, you want to rewire. So kind of take note of what's not working. So, if you see yourself ruminating over something negative, really become the observer of your thought. Stop and say, oh gosh, I keep, posting mean political posts, or I'm so reactive. I keep getting, I'm ruminating. And, you might do it. We get neurotic about our health. We can ruminate about health issues. We can ruminate about anything. But when you notice that repetitive thought process, you can stop it. You can say, okay, this is just a thought. I control it and I can rethink it. And I mean, there's so much I can go into, but I'll say the bottom line with this rewiring of the brain is this increased resilience, which is a very general concept. So this capacity to recover quickly from adversity or stress. So when you I'll say the one lesson of mindfulness is mindfulness makes us the observer. Instead of being caught in this narrative, in this story that we're telling ourselves, our thoughts create a narrative, a story. When we become mindful, we can say, oh my God, look, I'm telling myself this story and I'm creating these thoughts and I'm just the observer of them. Let me just step outside this situation and see that I'm merely an observer. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not a failure. I'm not whatever it is that you're struggling with. I'm just thinking that. And I can retrain those thoughts. And so, you know, a big part of mindfulness is breath. There are lots of breath techniques. I know we're going to run out of time, but there's like a couple that I can do in like 30 seconds and they can be life-changing. So we can get weird for 5 seconds and okay. So there's one, I'm doing super simple ones. So there's one called Lion's Breath. And one of my mentors, Sandy Abrams, who wrote this amazing book on breath, and it's called Breathe to Succeed. She wrote it for the workplace, for entrepreneurs. And she and I do this, and she teaches it in her session. So it's called Lion's Breath. So I'm going to do it once, and then you and I are going to do it together 3 times. Right. We're going to get weird. Okay. So it's like the primal scream of breath, and it's a super easy way to reset. So I breathe in through my nose, and then I breathe out through my mouth and stick out my tongue. So we're going to do 3 lion's breaths, Luke. Okay. And Ron or whoever's in the background there, you got to join in. I want to see your tonsils. Okay. So so you could have screamed at your spouse, or you could have done lion's breath. You could do it in the supermarket. And then one other thing I said, you know, is if you feel yourself having that stress response, increase your exhale. So whatever you can count your inhale. I always say count inhale for 4, exhale for 6. Do it a few times. And then one other technique that I know the Marines do, and a lot of military training incorporates this, is called box breath. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And that, I know we're running out of time, so I'm not going to do it, but that is just providing you with the space to reset. Reset your body, reset your mind.
Yeah. I love it. I love it, Gianna. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for taking this as an important, you know, a concept.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if anybody, thinks otherwise, just, put it to practice. I challenge you, put some of this stuff to practice.
Yeah.
See how it's changing your life. I've been focusing on breathing. I've been doing some kind of long-term breath work, meditation exercises, and it's really opening up my mind. Almost like, I've never done LSD, but almost like, that type of experience, it can really take you there to where you're really thinking about things on almost like a higher level. And again, I know it sounds funny, but it's so true. And I want to help tile contractors everywhere, business owners. So Gianna, if somebody wants to know more, if they want to, talk to you, where do they find you? Where do they reach out?
So, Vallefuoco.com is our tile website, and my personal website also links to it, JiannaVallefuoco.com or wisdomontap.com. It's easier to spell and pronounce. And I'll be posting, I do some private meditation classes, but I'm going to be doing weekly public classes live, and I'll be uploading my YouTube channel, which is, you can access it on my website. And we can do a meditation at some point, Luke. I know Ron, whoever's there, will join us.
We've had a handful of people here the whole time, some hopping in and out, but we've had a core group here. So
great.
People are interested. It's a good thing. It's a good pursuit. So once again, thank you, Gianna. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for this time with you, Luke.
You're welcome. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
All right. I'm not sure if that's how you know, but I'll carry out the story. So